Welcome to The Mystery, a series of conversations on the mystery of life as ceremony with Joanna Maria Ilutz of The Gentle Healing Way and Melanie Niederskjöld of 𝑘𝒆𝒄𝒐𝒅𝒆. Our intention for this podcast is to bring light into dark spaces in these dark times, to sit with the tender places within us as individuals and in the collective. We're bringing our hearts together with the intention to speak into what needs to be addressed. We intend to do it as gently as possible, and along the way you can certainly expect giggles and rants and everything in between. We're striving to bring some common sense into the spirituality world, the murkiness, the confusion, the chaos of it all. And we want to bring the right questions that help promote safety so that people can find the right paths, the right teachers for themselves, and have good guides of what questions to ask when and how. This podcast is intended for people who are in the early days of their spiritual awakening, and equally other walkers on the way alike, whether you've been doing this for a few months or a few years. You are welcome here, and thank you for bringing your heart to this space. So welcome to The Mystery. Our next episode is about to begin. Welcome to The Mystery, where we're pulling back the veil. We are your hosts, Melanie O'Driscoll and
Joanna Maria Ilutz.
And we're here to sit in the mystery of the work and speak into places that we're led to speak, and hopefully bring a little bit of light into your day, into your ears as you listen to us.
And maybe a little bit of safety if you're on the road in need of a little bit of something else than the world that we can see.
Yeah.
So we have an interesting topic, or so we think, or so we feel, that we have prepared for you today.
Yeah, so we want to talk a little bit about the phrase that came was like the rules of engagement of like, okay, so you're called to do healing work on yourself or in a wider sense. What is a good way to engage with the work in a realm where there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of tenderness, there's a lot of pain points, there's also a lot of beauty and goodness and gorgeous community, but it's a tender space to navigate. And between us, we've both found certain ways of what to do and what not to do, and of course this is different for everybody, but we wanted to speak in a bit to what we see as a good way to engage with the work.
And also we might address some of the things that would have been done traditionally, just to remind us of certain things that were done in a certain way because they would keep people safe.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these things are not here anymore, so it's kind of tricky navigating the world of doing the spiritual work or energy work, kind of like tiptoeing and kind of like being blindfolded and trying to find your way through a whole bunch of things that are being offered, and very few rules of engagement that are being talked about. And so this is why we chose this particular topic for our first official episode.
And just as you're saying that, I can see how, because we've all come from so many structures, whether it's school or our family system or work lives, I think there's a big sense for a lot of people in this work of breaking free from any rules because yay, let's be liberated. And equally that can end up creating a lot of extra pain that doesn't necessarily need to be there, either within ourselves or within community or with other people. So it's like this kind of sense of like titrating things, that we go slowly, we go little by little, step by step. And maybe a good place to start is with what you mentioned there, like the kind of some of the older ways of where things have come from, and that we might kind of build upon that then and kind of see what it was, where we are, and where we can kind of go.
And also with what we can do in today's world, because many of those things, they would be nice, but they're not. They're very hard to implement these days. They're very hard to navigate. And so I keep thinking, like one of the things that always there was always on my mind was the fact that not every person who apprenticed actually basically got the job. I think let's start from there. And I think one of my favorite examples that very few people talk about, like everybody knows about Carlos Castañeda. Well, if you read Carlos Castañeda's first book, you're going to see that the man never completed his training. He never got there. And so many people seem to be overlooking that. That does not mean that he didn't have valuable teachings or anything. But as far as traditional teachings go, that's it. That's as far as he got. And that, that's okay as well. But that goes to show how hard it would have been.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're so used in today's world, we go to school for so many years, and then we go to university for 4 years, and then we have a degree, and then we can practice. Well, with the ways of the spiritual realm, that doesn't quite work that way. And it would have been something, and this is still happening to this day with certain Native American communities, but also other traditional communities, like for example Korea. That's one that I personally know about, where I know this Korean medicine woman, and her apprentice has been with her for 10 years. And that means assisting in ceremony and helping her put the clothes on and getting the ceremonial, offering food and drumming during the ceremony and helping with all the preparations and a little bit in the spiritual work. But like in traditional societies, this would have been something very important to have those years that you spent there kind of training. And of course you're going to be asking, well, what can we do? Because it's not like we have a whole bunch of teachers on every corner of the road going like, oh yeah, come with me and apprentice. And that is true. I feel that in this day and age, training this way has become a privilege. I myself have not done a full apprenticeship with somebody in that particular way. And that being said, I have spent a lot of time with a whole bunch of medicine people from all over the world. That's just how my life has been, and I completely own it. I own the journey, and I'm very honest about these things. So yeah, traditionally, and I've seen this many times on Turtle Island in the United States, that you spend years bringing coffee. And I remember one of the first things that happened to me over there, we went for a big ceremony there, and one of the elders said, I asked, what can I do? What can I help? And they said, well, you gotta clean the sweat lodge. Right on the inside, it was completely overgrown. Just structure. Now it was completely hard. It was very, very dry. The land was extremely dry. They had ticks there the size of a medium-sized spider. It was and they would just when you would take them off, they would kind of come off with a bit of your skin. So it was kind of like just to set the, and then I spent one day on my hands and knees cleaning that sweat lodge of grass and, just making it all clear so that we could sit on it and everything. And then by the morning of the next day, I said, oh yeah, I finished that. And they were like, oh yeah, we're not going to need that anyway. So, and in Europe, most people would have kind of lost it and were like, why did I do that work? So I just laughed. And I was like, okay, point taken. So I just said, oh, okay. That was, that was it. And then I went to the next task, whatever that was. But that's always going to stay with me. And and I don't know what would have happened had I kind of made a scene or made a big deal out of it. I don't think anything good. But yeah, that's always a story that I tell when it comes to, this is how you learn.
Yeah.
And I would have received a lot of teachings and a lot of songs from the women in the kitchen while peeling spuds and preparing the food for the people and whatnot. That's actually one of my favorite places to be when I'm over there.
Yeah.
When I'm not involved in the ceremony or I don't sing, that's the place where you'll always find me.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's and these things are important. First of all, because you learn to serve, because this work is in service for the people. You learn to serve, and then it's also a really good environment for the elders to watch you. And watch what your principles are, and watch how you are, what your frame of mind is, how you react to things, how you don't react to things. Or I have a good few of these little stories where I really, really, really felt that I was completely scrutinized, and especially more so because I'm white. So it would have been like 40 times stricter for me than for other people over there, and that's okay. It's the price you pay to go there and be in that place and in that space and learn from people who haven't stopped doing it for so many hundreds or thousands of years.
Yeah.
And that's what was always really important to me. But I feel that, long story short, I feel that in today's world, a lot of people take a lot of shortcuts. They'll go and they'll learn a technique, and then they'll go about practicing it. And one of the things that I was taught was that the ceremony itself is just the scene part of it. They're just emotions. So what you see, they're just emotions. But actually what the ceremony is, it's everything that you don't see. It's everything that's underneath. It's the stories. It's the way energy is being maneuvered. It's the way people are held. It's the protocol. It's the, all the unseen. The way I always describe it is like an iceberg. So you just see the tip of the iceberg. And people think, many times people think that little tiny itty bitty tip of the iceberg, that's what the ceremony is. It's not. It's everything else.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah. And listening to you talk about that, it makes me think of where I've received those teachings, or where I haven't. And one place that I have received them was in the Buddhist group. Now, this Buddhist organization was really old. It went back to 12th century in Japan.
Oh, wow.
With Nichiren Daishonin, who was a monk who decided he wanted to be the most well-read man in all Japan, and read all of the sutras and all of the practices and all of the techniques. And he decided through all of his reading, or came to the conclusion, that the Lotus Sutra had kind of assimilated and collected the Buddha's teachings in the kind of most pure sense of all of them. There was no judgment between if you were a man or a woman, or if you were rich or you were poor. Everybody was allowed to chant and to practice. So he used to invite people to chant the words of the Lotus Sutra in Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and chant that over and over and over. And it's known as the Buddhism of the sun. It's this really strong, hopeful prayer. And during that time in Japan, there was earthquakes and tsunamis and loads of like really corrupt feudal lords, and you know, the place was quite chaotic, a bit like maybe we could say it is today. That has also been at many other points of history. And this was like this forging of hope for the people. It was a real like practice of the people. And then over the years it's been taken and it's gone up to temples, and then it's kind of fallen back down and it's come back to the people. So the particular branch that I engaged with, the SGI, it was an organization that formed in Japan after World War II, when the people were trying to recover from the war. And the two men who founded it, like there was 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂 founded it first. He was the president of a school, or the principal of a school, and he realized that the biggest way to kind of support and enlighten people was that they become educated, that they learn and grow, but have their own personal human revolution, that they get to grow and excel in exactly the unique way that they need to do that, and that they're supported to do that. So then his disciple was Yosei Toda, and a huge part of this practice is that mentor-disciple relationship between 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂 and Yosei Toda, but between everybody. So these two men founded the practice, and then during World War II, the government really wanted it to be very only Shinto religion practice, so anybody that had another practice was not allowed. And in the practice it's called a Gohonzon, which is like a reflection of ourselves. It like mirrors our inner nature, and it has Nam Myoho Renge Kyo down the bottom, and then it has all the characters of like the sun, the moon, the stars, men, women. It has everything encompassed in it, and it's like a reflection. And the invitation is to chant in the morning and the evening, and to chant at this shrine that it isn't that you're worshipping it, but that it's reflecting back your own Buddha nature, or your own Christed nature, your own biggest, most loving, beautiful part you could be. And it invites you to polish it up and to polish your slate, to keep polishing, so that you kind of clear away any negativity or resistance or things that are kind of like it's like an energy healing almost in itself, because you're using your own voice in the practice. So that's how the practice works. And then the way it's been structured is it's totally led by the people. So there is a president. He's actually just passed away, and he was the disciple of Yosei Toda. And Makaguchi and Toda both went to prison during World War II for their beliefs, and they were both refused to give it up. And 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂 Makaguchi actually died in prison, refusing to give up his beliefs when he was like 80. And he'd been in there for a few years, and he got up one morning, he said, "I'm going to die today." And at that stage, all the guys, the guards, were obviously after kind of getting some level of respect for this like badass old fella who like won't give up his beliefs, and he's like avidly chanting morning and evening. And they go over to offer him help to get him down to the hospital wing, and he's like, "Nope, I'll get there myself." And he walks down and lies in the bed, and he died. So then Yosei Toda was released from prison, and he took up the practice and really galvanized, post-war Japan to help rebuild. And it was very much like the people's practice. It was this really strong thing of hope for the people. So they're coming out of nuclear war times, overcoming that. And then in that time, one of the things in the practice is that they really advocate and kind of get behind the youth, because they know that they are going to be the way of the future, and that they have ways of seeing or understanding that they don't necessarily know. So in that mentor-disciple relationship, there's this very strong and clear piece of the mentor almost wants the disciple to be better than them. They're teaching them for them to excel and surpass them. And so a lot of people would have referred to the current president that's just passed away, Daisaku Ikeda, as their mentor. And when he died, it was decided at a national level that there'd be no more president, and it's all just gone to the people. So each little district is self-organizing, and there's usually a meeting to kind of talk about practical things in the organization. There's a meeting where people come together and chant and share their experiences. It's like a discussion meeting. And then there's a study meeting as well. And then there's one day of the month, the first Sunday of every month, where people meet to chant together for an hour for world peace. And so that's how the Cork group was organized anyway. And it was very kind of disciplined, and we might watch a lecture and have a talk, and it was very like this. And with the discussion meeting in particular, people would be invited to participate. So one of the actions, and Ireland doesn't have a centre yet, but in other places, especially in like the UK and Japan and all around the world, there are centres. And one of the most like valued opportunities is to do 𝒑𝒂𝒂, which is to go and be of service, to go and offer people teas and coffees, to go and stand at the door and direct people where they need to go, to manage the car park and help people find their way, to really encourage someone and support them, someone that you know is struggling, to like encourage them to like go to the meeting when you know they're really struggling. And that's really valued as a practice in the organisation. So it's really strong in its like community kind of resilience, because people are so encouraged to do that kind of care work for each other and the act of service, and also encourage each other when it's hard. So particularly with the discussion meeting, people would be given the opportunity to facilitate it, where they might share their experience. And you might find out a month before, and for that month you're expected to kind of chant and pray and have an intention and work with whatever is on in your life. Maybe you're looking for a new home, or you're transforming something in your job. Whatever that is for every person. And part of the organisation is this sense of having all these beautiful, unique people in every different sector of society all over the world chanting and working for this kind of, to bring forward Buddhahood, which is courage, compassion and wisdom. So one of the activities is to share at a meeting, which everybody knows you have so much resistance for before you come up. But I'm kind of after going off track, and I'm going to come back to that later. But what I wanted to say back to what you said is that in the 𝒑𝒂𝒂 activities, in the service activities, there's this one funny story that goes around where it was in one of the, I think it was 𝒑𝒊𝒔𝒂𝒆 Court, which is the organisation in London. And there was these two guys, and they got the job to clean the bathrooms. And one guy was like, oh, I have to clean the toilet, and was moaning and groaning or whatever. And the other guy almost wrestled the toilet brush out of his hand, because he knows that by doing the seemingly worst job, it's actually the best job, because he gets so much like, I guess, unseen benefit by being willing to serve and do the like gross cleaning the toilets job, like in your story, the cleaning the sweat lodge with the big ticks, you know, to do that, whether you know it or not, but to do that work and to do it with a willing heart. And it's from what I can see in most, you know, organized religions, in their good sense, that is a huge part of any practice, is about selfless service. That ultimately, if what you're doing isn't orientated towards selfless service of some kind, then what are you doing? Now, of course, that can be co-opted and people can be sidetracked to disregard their own needs, which isn't good either.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like that's a brilliant way of having been organized. That's really, really good. And like while you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that in also what you were saying, and also in all the kind of like ceremonial, spiritual, whatever you want to call them, ways that I've been part of or witnessed. There are a few like kind of like foundation stones for doing the work, and one is exactly what you were saying. Not only to be willing to do those acts of service in that way, but to do them completely wholeheartedly. Because I've seen a lot of people over the years go, oh yeah, I'm going to do these because then they're going to see me and then they're going to share with me. And spoiler alert, they won't. Because they can, you know, a good elder has a really good eye for spotting BS. Their BS detector is so amazing. #life goals. You know. And then the other thing is discipline. There is a great deal of discipline in organizing things, and in being organized with your practice, with your life. Now, that doesn't always mean, for some traditions it does mean, you know, you got to get up every day and do this and this and this. For other things, for other ways, it's not quite that way, but there needs to be a spiritual discipline. Like with everything, you know. For some, like when you go and prepare for a big ceremony, that's like the way we do it. It's about 8-12 days that you're completely 100% there. You basically work from morning till evening, and then and then by the time the ceremony starts, you're completely wrecked. But the thing is to be willing and to do it out of this place of, yeah, of course I'm going to do it. What else am I going to do? This natural. So there is this matter of serving. There is this matter of discipline. And then, of course, the inner work that will chop away in not so gentle ways at your ego and the way you think and what you think is good and what you don't. Like, I just recently had a conversation with this woman who wanted to actually come to Jer's workshop, and she was asking me, she said, should I bring my drum? And I was like, nah, you won't need it. And actually, do you know what? Just don't bring anything of what you've ever learned so far. And she was like, oh, that's a good idea, because I'm in that particular place in my life. I'm like, yes, that's the,
good.
That's the way. And then, and then this willingness to put in the work.
Yeah.
Without having the expectation that, oh yeah, if I do this, I'm going to receive that. Or if I'm going to work so many years, I'm going to be able to do that. It's not about this.
Yeah.
I always say, when I work, I always encourage people to look inwards to see the place where your actions, where their actions are coming from, where our actions are coming from. Like, am I doing this for my own ego or to polish my own statue that I'm slowly building in my backyard? Or am I really doing this because this is the only thing that makes sense? Or, of course, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
And it's a tricky place. Like, it's not to say that because you're willing and you're sincere that you're not going to notice places where you're like, oh, I was totally people pleasing when I did that, or
absolutely,
oh, I was really trying to overly be nice or do something because I thought that that's what I should do, but actually it wasn't appropriate. Or we're all going to meet those points of like, oh, seeing those things. And that's the point of the practice to an extent, and it's the point of community, that you have people to talk to about it who've maybe gone through similar, because I think it's when we're in it on our own that we can kind of get into these loops. And it's so important that there's like other people with us on the journey, that we're not just kind of overly processing in our own brains about all these things, but that we're actually sharing our practice. Like in the Buddhism, it was like community, the practice, and study. They were the three pillars of faith. They were the three things of like, and there was kind of things that, if you were feeling particularly kind of like low and maybe getting a bit kind of caught up in your head, a lot of the time it was like something was the remedy. Maybe you needed to reach out to more people. If you were really caught up in your own practice, maybe you just needed to support someone else and kind of get over yourself in that way by supporting someone else, or maybe maybe you're just having a lot of doubt and kind of nothing is flowing well and you're kind of a bit like cluttered. Maybe just chanting more, because it's a chant, it's also like a sound healing practice. It really clarifies the body, because you're bringing your vibration, your voice through your body a lot, so it can bring a lot of clarity. And then likewise, if you're kind of maybe finding yourself in the same habit or loop and you're not really understanding why, then you might choose study, because you want to get more clear on, what's actually happening to me. And look, there's a whole lineage of people that have experienced the exact same thing that I experienced. I'm not as special as I thought I was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really one other thing that really strikes me when you talk about this is how important it is, or at least this was my experience, and from what I hear it was your experience as well, to be in ceremony and with community who have been doing this for a while and committing to this for a good chunk of your life. And this is simply like, I have met people who were living in the forest for 10 years and then stuff started opening, but honestly that's the hard way, because like you were saying about having community to catch you, like one of the things I'm most grateful for in this work, in my life and the way things have worked for me so far, is that if I should ever go cuckoo in any particular direction, I have a good few sisters who will gently slap me on the back of my head so that I can snap out of it. And I am so grateful for that, because that's one of the things that I had the longing for when I was growing up in these ways. And what I mean by that is just starting off was the fact that I did not have elders to guide me.
Yeah.
Like, had it been for me, if I would have had a choice, I would have, I don't know, been taken away from home when I was like 5 years old and stuck in a cabin in the woods or in a temple or in a anything and just stayed there. Yeah. You know, that would have been my choice.
Yeah. The shaman who I met, or the medicine man who I met when I was in Peru, who blessed me with the tobacco, we heard a little bit of his story, and he and some of the other boys from the village, including his brother, I think there might have been 5 or 6 of them in total, they went when they were about 5 to go and live with the practicing medicine man, and they would put like a tiny bit of ayahuasca like on their gum every day and like slowly actualize to the medicine. And by the time he was like 12, 13, there was only him and one other boy that were left that had like lasted through the training. Because like you said, it's the hard way, but also there's that he's been doing that since childhood to such a degree where there's almost like he doesn't even know anything else. It's not like he's found it through a modern way, which I might add there of kind of how I found my way in a very modern way. Like as I was beginning and I had this big ego disillusionment, like before I found the Buddhist group, the places I found, I remember they kind of almost felt like my, kind of like spiritual parents, teachers, that kind of energy. Was my partner at the time, his mom, she gave me that Woman Who Wrote the Wolves book, and just as a source of kind of nourishment, even though I didn't spend that much time with her, but just having her as like a light kind of in my path was really helpful. And then also at the same time I had a psychotherapist who was male, and he was older, I'd say he was like in his 60s, and just had that kind of really reassuring grandfatherly presence, but also a lot of wisdom in the kind of realms. So while I was flip-flopping between, oh my god, what if I'm bipolar, he was like, I've worked with people, you're not bipolar. So they would have been 2 places in a very modern world where I did find people who had the wisdom that I needed to just kind of get through that step until I found myself in a place where I could find a community to practice in.
Oh, that's such a gift. I did not have that till way later. Like now I do, but I did not have it for the first, I'd say, because I don't know when to start, but like for the first probably till I was maybe in my late 20s, I would have not had that. Yeah. And I deeply missed it. Yeah. You know, for the way, the place my path took me, and the practices that I was doing, or like you know, the things that I was learning, there was just nobody around to reach out to, and that was also a little bit harder with you know, there was no Facebook Messenger, all of that, and I would have really loved it. But had I had a choice, that would have been me, to be taken away and just be someplace and be taught and just do that as a full time. Yeah. You know, I often think about it when I, you know, kind of in a parallel world, that's how it would have looked like. Yeah. And of course I would have thought about going and joining a convent and things like that when I was around 18 after school, but they would have kicked me out because I'm a bit of a rebel. Yeah. So I have a lot of respect and I have a lot of discipline when it needs to be, but I have this very organic aversion towards dogma. And that is not a good thing in many places, and that's probably what ended me up with indigenous people and why I feel so at home there. And so these are a few of the things that we got to keep in mind, when we start off, to look for people who've been doing it for a longer time, to see, to spend as much time as we can in ceremony with people who've been doing it for generations and generations and generations. And this brings me to one of the things that is particularly close to my heart, which is like sacred songs and ceremonial songs. Because the songs that we would have learned and that I would have learned, they all have their protocol. Each song has their own mission, if you will. And each song is sung under certain circumstances at certain times. You don't just blurt it out in a pub while people are having pints. It's not, certain songs are not social, and there's a lot to it. But another thing that I feel that is quite missing in our European space is that a lot of the lineages have been, I don't want to say broken, but
Mm.
misplaced. Let's call it misplaced.
I feel like losing your keys.
A bit like losing your keys. And then when people learn these songs, they learn sacred songs, once you acknowledge that lineage, and once you learn to sing the song right, and once you understand and know its protocol, then it will work with you. And then the way I always explain it is, then when you sing that song, when you've done all of that, then you have all the people singing with you who have ever sung that song.
Beautiful.
When you honor that. And this is another thing, it's just not a common thing. Of course, there are people who still have it, and everywhere, but that discipline of being in ceremony and of having that respect and that reverence and that respect for the seen and the unseen, that's just not something many of us would have been raised with.
Something that came listening to you and that I've pondered and reflected on a lot is this idea of a daily practice, and how essential it is to have a way of connecting in with God, with Creator, with the divine regularly. But something I found with the Buddhist practice in particular, it was an active chant, it was a daily chant. I never managed to do twice a day, but I would do once a day as best I could. But after an amount of time, because it was an active chant and it was such a kind of a powerful sound, I got to a point where I was dealing with other things in my life, but I started having a really chronic pain in my head, so it actually hurt to chant. And I knew there were some teachings in the practice where the President 𝑾𝒆𝒊𝒔𝒐𝒅𝒆, he had been sick through loads of his life, and his life expectancy was in his 50s or 60s, and he ended up living till he was 95. So he chanted and persevered, and that was a big part of the practice, which is kind of part of what I stopped resonating with, because I was that's all well and good for just coming out of World War II and a different generation. But I don't think my generation or my body or who or where I am now is asking for me to push through pain when actually I have other options to be with it in different ways. So I left the practice while also, and through my ordination, I think I mentioned last week, I really had a very strong connection with Mary Magdalene and was allergic to anything Christian, but Mary Magdalene was this light. I was okay, what's happening? Hi. And every Easter having these really profound spiritual experiences and being what is happening? But so I trusted that and I followed it. And when I was ordained, I was actually ordained the day after Mary Magdalene's feast day. So we had the whole preparation day was in that energy, and in the ordination it was I felt I was able to really claim that lineage more of this kind of Christian Christian-esque but not in any particular church or any particular lineage, but in this embodied way of how I felt Mary Magdalene lead me, and how I had felt it through like her gospel and teachers I'd listened to about her. And it was like this other way of bringing me in. So I left the Buddhist practice and I went into leaning more into Christian prayer. And Christian prayer has different things. Like you could pray the rosary, or you could pray certain prayers. You can go to mass, you can go to church, or it's not the same as just chant the same time every day, 2 times a day. It's different. And what I also find is that being a woman, I'm different on different weeks depending on where I am in my cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't feel like doing the same practice every day, but I definitely struggled with a lot of shame of feeling like I should have a same daily spiritual practice every day. And sometimes I'd also do yoga. But so what I found now is I have a bit of a pick and mix. And I think a lot of people have a pick and mix. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. Like,
well, as long as it's a healthy, grounded in groundedness, pick and mix, it can absolutely work. Like I was talking about last week, like I'm also a mixture of sorts, because of the way my life has been, and because of everything like that. And there is like one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking is that a lot of the spiritual practices that we have in today's world are practices that have come through men, and that are designed and made for the male system. And they are very, very, they can be very different at certain times to the way a woman can work. You know, I was really extremely fortunate, and I'm extremely privileged to have been part of well done women's ceremonies, set with good women's leaders, and, you know, done women's sweat lodges and sat with them in prayers and done water ceremonies, and just being with these kind of women for so many, I don't know, for such a long time. And at so many times. So I'm really, really privileged that way. And that is a big thing, you know, like I always think about this, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you know, I think about it, how different, because it doesn't mean that they're wrong or that they're bad. It's just at certain times, these very male-led spiritual practices, they just don't work for women. You know, and in the old days, the way my understanding is, especially in the native way, is that women would have never gone to a sweat lodge or never danced the sun dance before, because that was a time when they had their own ceremonies, when they were working with it, where they were having their monthly ceremonies. Somebody else would go into their house and cook and clean and do all the housework and do all their chores and their work, and then come and feed them and brush their hair and, you know, take care of them. And then so they had that innate time for prayer every month. And it's also my understanding that many of the ceremonies that came through a woman, and that they were given to men.
Beautiful. In
the sense of, you know, here,
you
know, try this kind of thing. Also partly because we are endowed with this natural way of cleansing our body and our mind and our soul, which again, like I really want to stress on this, does not make us better. It does not make us special. It's just our systems are a little bit different. And so I completely hear you when you say, you know, I had times when I didn't want to chant every day, because probably your system was like, oh, today is a day of rest. Today I just need prayer. Today I just need silence. And these are, again, certain things that we have forgotten, and it's also, again, it's quite complicated. I was watching like a few days ago, there is this beautiful documentary. It's called Smoke Sauna Sisterhood. It's an Estonian documentary that talks about this old sweat hot sauna ceremony that they have at the particular group of people in Estonia, of women have, and it's beautiful. The whole documentary is basically naked women in a sauna talking. Gorgeous. And sharing really really deep and sometimes quite gnarly personal experiences, and the film is extremely well done. It's extremely well done, and I was watching it, and as I was watching it I was like, it just looked like, to me it was like, oh yeah, this is like a Wednesday. You know, it was just like the most normal thing in the world. When I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, I'm so privileged to have this experience and to find this the most normal thing. And then the next thing I was like, oh my God, watch this, because after this documentary goes out, and it has been out, it's really successful, a whole bunch of women are just going to start doing it. But they won't know what they're doing, you know? Yeah. Because like even in that documentary, they were never showing the energy work being done. They didn't even show the woman who was leading the ceremony. I don't think her face was ever on there. You know, like there are a lot of things. It's not just emotions. And when you think about those things, like these particular traditions, they would still exist in little pockets, and if they don't, then we're going to probably have to recreate them or create them for the world that we live in now. Because the needs of the people who live now are very different than the needs of the people who were living 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and that's another thing that we can talk about. But should we start recreating or bringing back to life these old ways and these old ceremonies? It's so vital that it's done right, and that it's done by people who know what they're doing, because that was not just, bundles of herbs that were gathered, and that it's not about that. Those are the motions, so if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Coming back to your question, sometimes in today's world, the way we are wired, like it is a little bit of a pick and mix. Like myself as well, I would have had a lot of teachings, but I'm never going to be Native American. I will have never been born and raised in that particular culture, you know. And at the same time, I have the DNA that is kind of activated because of those unbroken ceremonies. Yeah. What I call unbroken ceremonies. And then that brings me on incomplete. And then I'm here. I'm in Ireland, steeped in a completely different culture altogether. It's not like... ideally, years ago, I would have been, born and raised and died in one culture with one practice, and I would have completely done that. Just lived that and nothing else. And the reality of how I am and how the work has been working for me, that's not that. But that does not mean that I take shortcuts. Like I was talking to Jer a while back, because I would have gone to his workshops and done his work for about 6+ years, and then people just started coming to me and they're like, oh, can you do prayers with me? And it was just like, it was the people, and the people were asking, and I was like, I really, really, really don't want to do this, but I think it's time, I feel it's time. And it was the same with the sweat lodge. I didn't want to start running lodges. And I refused it, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. It's so much of a responsibility. It's such a huge responsibility. I don't want it. And then, John, you've met John Shamashi from Canada. He was there, and he was like, sister, you got to start pouring the water. And then my ex-partner, he was like, no, you got to start doing the lodges. And I was like, no. And then another sister of mine who would have trained with the grandma for 20 years, she was like, please, 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 here, just please start doing the lodges. And I really, really didn't want to. I've been fighting it for as long as I can remember, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I just gave in, and then I just said, because it would have made me sick. That's how it works for me, you know. But that does not mean, yes, I am a combination of different things. I'm trying as much as I can to keep them clear.
Yeah.
To keep them, I respect them enough to kind of say, okay, this is what this is, this is what this is, this is what this is. I'll be very clear if this is a Native American thing, or this is one of the things that came in a vision, or you know, if that's Jer's work, or things like that. I try to keep them as clean and as clear as possible, and at the same time, my experience is not the way it would work for somebody who is in the culture, born and reared.
Yeah. Something that I'm considering, because it's something I think is really important with this work, and I can hear it in all of what you're saying, is this sense of commitment of, you know, when you say you'll do something, you'll do it, and that you got to a point where with the lodges and the sweats you were like, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. But now that you've said yes to do it, you hold it with great integrity, and you do it, and you really do it as it needs to be done. And I guess that's more as a practitioner, and maybe what I'm naming now is more as a actually it's the same word, practitioner. Practitioner as facilitator, or practitioner as just for yourself. It's actually the same thing. That's funny. But like I kind of mentioned it earlier, but like in the Buddhist group, like it would be known, especially if you were the facilitator of a discussion meeting, it would be known that like you'd have a really hard month. Like you would face your shit. Whatever had to come up up before that meeting, or before that lodge, or whatever was to come. So there was a real good learning in that for me, of like to go, even if you feel, I used to feel like revolted, you know, at the thought of going to a group sometimes. I had so much shame I was processing in my body, so much guilt, so much grief, just so many of these sticky, gross feelings at the feeling of going and sitting in a group where I was going to be like seen. Oh my God, I would have rather to like lie down and die. But because the culture in the space was so good at encouraging us to go, even when it was hard, and of course you still might not go, but almost always then if you didn't go, there'd be someone there to kind of check in on you and go like, hey, are you okay? So there's a sense in that for me of the just what commitment means in this work and how to lean into that, because I think we've talked a bit about this, where sometimes you're genuinely like really sick, and really your sense of, I really don't want to go to this ceremony that I've booked, or this thing that I'm committed to. Sometimes that's right, and I think more often the level of resistance we get to going to something is actually something we need to learn to sit with, and hold and widen our capacity to sit with the discomfort and still do the thing, like feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep. It's like sometimes we give up 1 second before the miracle happens. And that is when we don't sit with it. And again, there is this big difference between, sometimes it's really, the lesson is, I'm going to just take it easy, and I'm just going to go and have an ice cream or have a coffee. We do have the luxury to do that, right? And this is something that would happen exactly what you were describing. This is something that happens regularly before ceremony. People will have extreme resistance. Like I know every year when I go to Sundance, like I have like 40,000 thoughts, and sometimes things go wrong, and flat tires, and oh God, tents break, and like, you know, just like sometimes it's just little things, and sometimes it's really, really bad, big things, not bad, but really big, where you're just like, oh, I'm just not going to go, I'm just going to stay home, and I'm going to be in my cozy bed, and I'm not going to do it. But those are those things that are ready to be released within that particular ceremony.
Yeah.
And they're coming up and they're going like, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to leave you, it's so good and cozy with you, kind of a thing. So that's kind of those resistances and those things sometimes that are just holding on to you and going like, no, but look, hey, there's hot chocolate there, and then your friend is here from America, and then you should maybe stay with them because you haven't seen them in a while. And like your mind is going to find 40,000 different excuses why you wouldn't do it. And then 9 times out of 10 people come and then they go like, oh my God, I'm so happy I came.
Yeah.
And then afterwards it would be like, oh no, this was actually extremely important for me. And this is the other part of the things that we're kind of not used to, and there are not a lot of teachings about it that we grew up with. So we just don't learn about this. Like I was really privileged and I was lucky to have these things so drilled in my head that I'm like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. This is what needs to be done, and then I just pull through. And sometimes, because the thing for me, at least as a practitioner on this side, what happens is that if something isn't meant to happen, then it's just gonna completely dissolve on its own.
Yeah. And
other times it's gonna be like, I really don't want to do it. Oh, but you really, really should. Yeah. And it's the same side. It's the same thing. Even when I go in the 10 ceremony. Yeah. There are every single time, even so many years into it, there is at least one time when I'm like, ugh, do I really want to do this to myself? Like, at Sundance, it's a thing where, in the morning, before the first day, and it's still dark out, and I always had this one tiny moment, like every part of me is completely happy and at peace, and there's this one tiny moment that I go like, do I really want to do this to myself? Why am I doing this to myself? This is brutal. Yeah. This is hardcore. And then the drums start, and then I'm like, oh my God, of course I'm going to do this. What else am I going to do? I live for this. But there's always that one little second that goes like, why am I doing this to myself? Yeah. So it also depends on what, because there are people who come to ceremony like they go to the doctor when there's something going on. And that's absolutely fine. Mm-hmm. That's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely... Because why would you go to the doctor when you're in perfect health, kind of a thing? Yeah. Unless you're in China, in which case you do prevention medicine, which is another thing that can be talked about. But like there are, and that's completely fine. So then, and there are people for whom this growth is important. Yeah. And then especially one thing that happens, especially when they have a lot of different practices that they alternate, that can create a lot of confusion, that can create a lot of dysfunction, and that can create a lot of split and unfinished processes that kind of just go on top of one another. Yeah. Especially if there is no proper integration. Yeah. And so that's another thing, because people have so many options these days that in Romanian we would say they just hop from one flower to the other. They just go hop, oh yeah, I'm going to do this now, and then I'm going to do this now, and then I'm going to do this now. And then many end up not doing anything properly. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we could speak more into that in another episode, like just around wider community practices. But on that of the committing, like when we did our ministry course, we used to meet online every Wednesday night, and we had other things as well in between that, where we had more intensive retreats or we had study groups and peer sessions, but every Wednesday night was class night. and you were expected to be there on time, camera on, and unless you had a really good excuse, you were expected to be there. And it actually was a requirement that if you potentially missed too many classes without good reason, or that you just missed too many even if you had good reasons, you actually might not be able to be ordained, because it was about coming and showing up and showing up and showing up. And even if you had really intense stuff going on in your life, you were expected to show up, because that's what we were being trained in, was to be ministers, to be able to be with the expanse of life. And I found that so often in a point of ceremony, or where there's like a breakthrough kind of into that mystery world, I often find there's this huge crack between a big point of grief and a huge point of joy, like that kind of stretches the moment in time, you know. And it's like that course was tempering us to be able to hold that. So at one stage we had to do these practicums where we would perform a ceremony that we'd written for the class, or like do it, like not do it, but say I had to do my wedding ceremony. Obviously I wasn't actually marrying the person, but to talk through the script and do it as if I was the minister. And I had to write the marriage I wanted. So, you know, it was a deep excavation into my own relationship with love and relationships and what was there. And in lots of ways it was really joyful. But at the same time, my dog was dying. I did not want to do that ceremony. I did not want to get up and speak into that place of love and union when my dog was dying, and I just wanted to be with my dog. But I knew that there was a lesson in leaning in and showing up and doing it, and not saying, oh, can I get an extension? Can I not do this right now? I have other things going on. But to be brave and to be able to go and hold it. And it has taught me so much about this. Show up no matter what. Like, I think sometimes I have this inner perfectionist, which I think a lot of people do. I think our modern culture enhances it.
I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. It's like, if you're not showing up at 100%, don't show up at all. If you don't feel good, don't go, because you should be there and you should feel good. But what I've actually learned through all of that, and the Buddhist group, those kind of layers of community, is like, just show up. Even if you're at like 20% capacity or 40%, or you feel like the worst person in the world because you're really sad about whatever.
Especially when you feel like that, you show up.
Yeah.
That was the way I was taught. Especially when you feel at your lowest, when you feel like poop and you don't want to go, and your emotions are all over the place, and you feel like the most worthless creature on the planet, and you feel like you're sad and you're just going to make everybody else's day miserable, and why would there even be your place? You have no place there, because look at all these other people, they're so amazing. And sure, I'm feeling like this and I'm not worth. That's when you go. That's when you when you feel like that, that's the time when you need a proper, good, well-led ceremony. That's the time. I hear many times, like, I put up lodges, and people, they say, oh, I'm going to come. And then every single time on the morning, I get messages like, oh, I have a little bit of a headache. And I don't mean, I have the flu, and, I mean, oh, I have a little bit of a headache and I'm a little bit tired, so I'm just going to stay home. And I'm like, okay, stay home. Knowing that, or like feeling that many times it's just postponing something that's gonna just like accumulate some more, and then when it does pop, it's like, so that's exactly like when we talk about how to know the difference between one and the other, especially when you feel at your lowest. Go to ceremony. But go to the right place. Don't go to quick fixes. Don't go to things that promise you intense experiences or elevating experience or whatnot. Go to places where you're going to be held and loved and safe and in community and in prayer. And where the person doing it knows what they're doing. But just go. Get yourself off the couch, get yourself off from bed. You don't even have to shower, just throw some clothes on and just go. Just go and just, those are the times when people need it the most. And I have, I think most the time I can remember it is I had just gotten a text from my mom that my grandmother had passed away, and 5 minutes later I had a session. And I went in and I did my session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and then I cried.
Yeah.
But after I was done with work, and it did not, you know, it did not seep in through the work. It didn't. Well, of course, sometimes you have to know when you're bounded, when you really can't. That's a different episode. But no, when you are in this line of work, like many times you're gonna have to put aside what's going on in your life to be able to do what you're doing. And I've seen this from spiritual leaders that I love and respect over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I've observed them, and this is the one common thread that I've seen. Yeah. With all.
Yeah. And
across cultures.
Yeah, and it's like, I think in so many ways we've been programmed that if we feel like that, we stay at home and hide and be on our own, especially after a series of lockdowns literally telling us to stay at home if we have something wrong with us. Yeah. This kind of like hiding because we don't feel good enough, and it's just easier to hide, and there's so many distractions and phones and screens and things we can hide behind. It's quite easy to do that. But you just said there, like, you see that with every like leader and every person who's doing the work. And all of those people were people who were just doing the work for themselves before.
For years and years.
And so even if you're not a leader in this work, or it's not work you're doing, it's the work in yourself, and it's for yourself. And it's actually through that if you were someone who wanted to facilitate or do something like that, which is another topic as well, it's always that own inner capacity for you to be able to show up and do the work, and show up and do the work. Especially when it's hard, and especially when you don't want to, but it's what's needed. Because like you said, it's just like things accumulate and build up, and can become physical illnesses, can become chronic illnesses in our bodies, you know, can just like anchor into us. So yeah, we move. People sometimes ask me about sweat lodges, and they're like, oh, what is it? I'm like, look, it's like a shower for the soul. You know, because in the same way that we wouldn't let the not shower for like 4 months, but we do energetically not shower for so many years, for so much time. And then also with this, what you were saying, you know, with the not going when we're at our worst, it is the same logic as if you were to say, I have a really, really bad flu, therefore I will not take medicine. Yeah. That makes absolutely no sense. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. Like, that's when you take medicine. You don't start taking medicine when you're super healthy and going like, oh, I feel really, really good. Let me take some, I don't know, ibuprofen. Yeah. Nobody would think about doing that, right? Yeah. So how would you think, oh, I'm going to go to ceremony because today I feel particularly good? Of course you can, because that's also a medicine when you share your joy. Yeah. But to not go because you're feeling bad, no sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, go whatever the weather, the internal weather. I remember going to my psychotherapist back when I was beginning, and I felt like walking over. I was like, God, I have nothing to talk about today. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I feel grand. It was like the best session I'd had. It was so powerful. It was in that space of actually going, oh, I actually feel grand, because I had a certain level then of emotional clarity and stability where I could actually dive into a piece of work that needed to be done. So it's like, go when you feel good, go when you feel bad, just go. Just go. It's called medicine for a reason. If it calls you. Yeah. If it doesn't, go have a coffee with your friends in a cafe. Yeah. Don't go because it's cool. Yeah. Don't go to ceremony because it's cool. Don't go to ceremony because it's hip. Don't go to ceremony because your best friend is going to ceremony. Hashtag no peer pressure. Don't go to ceremony just because, you can go once for curiosity if that's, but, don't go if you're not called to it. It's not, some people heal by working out in the gym. Yeah. Some people go to psychotherapy and that works brilliantly for them. Like, there are so many different ways to work with oneself. This is my way. This is definitely your way as well. But it's not everybody has to do it.
You're not cooler or better or more spiritual if you do it. One of the most spiritual people I know are shepherds in the mountains that stay up there and only are amongst sheep and dogs for 3 months out of the year. And they're absolutely spiritual, and they're completely connected to nature, and they can interpret the weather and the wind, and they know when the wolves are coming in. And they have this complete sensitivity for all that is around them. They don't need a workshop, and they don't need ceremony. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
But if this is your thing, if this works for you, if this has brought you ahead in your life, then please go. Then please go and do whatever it is to stay committed, and also take tiny breaks from it every now and again, should you need them. Sometimes we just need to, what I call life. We need to life a little bit every now and again. You know, and take the breaks if you need them, because then you're going to come back even stronger, you know. But especially if you're not in a good place, please go to ceremony.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Yeah. So this is welcome to the mystery kind of thing. Yeah. And we're probably going to be doing more elaborate episodes on particular things, and you can always message us and tell us if you would like to hear about particular things, or, you know, we're completely open to sharing about like kind of interacting with the community.
Yeah.
We don't want to do this just to speak into a mic every now and again, but rather really be in service of the people who are listening, and then just just drop us a line and see what feels right. Yeah,
beautiful.
So this was episode 2 of
Welcome to the Mystery. Thank you for joining another episode of Welcome to the Mystery. If you like what you've heard and you would like to hear more and sit with us, you can find more of our work through the link tree linked below. This has access to our free community gatherings, as well as our private one-to-one spaces and wider ceremony work. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to speak and share our thoughts with you today. Thank you for bringing your heart to the space, and we hope to connect with you again soon. 𝒔𝒆𝒚 𝒂𝒂𝒂 𝒂𝒂𝒂.